Hello, beautiful folks. Welcome back to Life Chats with Friends, your sacred spot for all things self-discovery and authentic living. It is so good to be back here with you all today for a really critical and important discussion anchored in Mental Health Awareness Month. As I'd mentioned in the last episode, we are picking up today with part 2 from a conversation that we had back in March with Dr. Andrea Holman from Lyra Health. I will quickly reintroduce Dr. Holman back to you all for those of you that may be joining us for the first time. And if you didn't listen to the first episode of this series, please go ahead and do that. We took some time to explore how we navigate things like identity, privilege, and religiosity. And today for part 2, we will be diving into mental health, specifically in the African American community and more broadly as well, and really leaning into the theme for this month, which is all about raising awareness of mental health issues, conditions, reducing stigma, and driving understanding. With that, I will quickly introduce Dr. Holman, and then we will dive right into this. So for those of you, again, joining us for the first time, that may be joining us for the first time, Dr. Holman is a former psychology professor at Huston-Tillotson University, now serving as a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging leader for Lyra Health, a leading provider of workforce mental health benefits available to more than 15 million people globally, focusing on workforce mental health. She creates and delivers educational content on how social identities affect mental health in the workplace. Previously, Dr. Holman co-chaired the Health and Wellness Group for Austin's Task Force on Institutional Racism and Systemic Inequities. Her research dives into African American psychology, racial identity complexities, and racial advocacy, featured in publications like The Counseling Psychologist and Harvard Business Review. Beyond academia, Dr. Holman is deeply involved in community work, serving on the board of directors for Humanities Texas and offering workshops on identity, racism, and privilege. She consults on diversity, equity, and inclusion practices for organizations and is a licensed foster parent with her husband, Tapera Holman. They have 2 sons, aged 10 and 6, and enjoy family time, dining out, and good American college football. Dr. Holman, once again, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to dive into this discussion with you today. Something that is near and dear to my heart, a big part of my lived experience growing up and with a lot of the people around me, primarily my family. So all things mental health and well-being, and specifically leaning into that with a lens on what this looks like for the Black community. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much. And it's so good to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. To be glutton for punishment, I guess. Trying to be back yet again. So I appreciate being here to talk about this. Also something near and dear to my heart as well.
Yeah. So how the last, I guess, 2 months been since we've last spoken? What's new? What's happening in your world?
Yes, the last 2 months have gone fast and furious. Let me tell you that much. Been very wild, very full. And so, it's funny, even thinking about this thing around mental health and wellness, which I also associate with rest and resting well. That's been easier said than done, I would say, over the last several months. But we're making it out here with lots of full busy things going on in our world.
Yes. And I think, yeah, that's a great segue for us to dive into this. But what I really wanted to start with is if you would be able to set us up and just kind of explain what the stigma is around mental health at large. And then again, specifically leaning into that through the lens of the experience of Black Americans today.
Sure. So mental health stigma is something that I say we, my colleagues and myself at Lyra Health talk about all of the time. And even when we're not talking about it, it's undergirding the conversation, right? So it is something that is similar, I would say, to isms, racism, sexism, those things. It's kind of in the air, okay? And just kind of part of what we breathe. I think you can internalize stigma around mental health without even trying to or intending to, because there are certain cultural messages that can happen. There are certain ways that behaviors are reinforced or shunned, that really teach you a lesson about what you should and should not say, how you should and should not behave. So when we're talking about stigma, there's something there, either spoken or unspoken, I think in two different ways. One of them, because we're talking about mental health, one of them that mental health is a given, that it's just something you are a healthy, strong, resilient person unless otherwise specified, right? So that's the baseline for all of the peoples around. If that sounds completely false, it is, but that's part of what creates stigma. But then there's this other part around mental illness, right? And mental distress and suffering and struggling. And if that impacts you mentally or emotionally, that then makes you somehow weak, or limited or frail in some sense. So if you put that together with these distorted ideas around what it means to be healthy and strong and what it means to struggle and have illness, there is this really unfortunate synergy between the two that says that it's really not okay to struggle. And if you struggle, it shouldn't be for very long. And if you are experiencing a long-term struggle with something around a mental health diagnosis or condition, something kind of wrong with you, right? I mean, you're kind of less than and inferior in general. Again, these things are not always spoken out loud. People don't talk like that, but they can act like that.
What do you think is the root cause of those thoughts, or where do those thoughts stem from, or how did we as a society get to a place where we can't be open about how we're feeling, or places that we're coming from that may not be roses and sunflowers every day in our experiences?
There's a lot to that. I think I'll talk about the things that come to mind first. There are many reasons for that, but what I think of first is a lack of understanding. So part of what we talk about at Lyra a lot of times is something called mental health literacy. So that's getting people education around vocabulary terms and different phrases that are involved in mental health so that they know exactly what that is and what that means. So I think that lack of understanding created confusion, kind of a mystery type of thing, because a lot of time for many years, what you knew of counseling or therapy really was from the movies or TV. It was very dramatic. It was very scary. Oftentimes, there were some things that would just make people uncomfortable because they didn't know or they didn't understand. And some things are off-putting when you're talking about severe mental health condition. It can make people uncomfortable if you're talking about different outbursts people may have, controlling their emotions, even things like hallucination, those type of things. It's really people can be very uncomfortable because they don't know that and they haven't spent time around people who have struggled with those things. So I think that lack of knowledge is one area, and lack of understanding. But also, if I might say this and lose some friends, but I think we have a level of discomfort with our own complexity. I'll say it like that. Because we, just like we talked about in the last episode, where we all have and lack privilege, I think we also
all have mental
have some sort of level of struggle or and strength, that we house inside of us. We are all we contain multitudes, and so I think sometimes we can be discomfortable, have shame around our own experiences in one sense. And then also I think we can kind of normalize what's going on in terms of our struggle. And I think that's particularly true if we're talking about the Black American community, that there has been a lot of, I'm gonna use the word trauma. There's been a lot of trauma, hurt, wounds, abuse, hardships in life. But because they've happened with such frequency to people that and people that look like you, it is what it is. Right. And so people will name certain very hard things and things that are happening to them that have a real impact on their mental health. But what you gonna do? Okay. And then we'll do that to each other, right? We'll end up harming and perpetuating that stigma to each other. You don't think I went through that? Same thing
Mm-hmm.
happened to me. Look at me. I'm doing okay. Right. And so
Normalizing it.
because we don't give ourselves that level of grace and compassion to struggle, we don't really give it to other people either.
Mm. And I guess kind of playing devil's advocate
Mm-hmm.
and looking at both sides of the
Mm-hmm.
coin, would you also say that this is the same for people that don't belong to the Black
Yeah.
community, or, kind of regardless of your race or identity, gender, like is this the same structure, mindset, philosophy, thought, experience, or
Mm-hmm.
suggested experience that you think people are going through? And then what is the differentiation specifically for the Black community, or where does that stigma lie for our community and
Mm-hmm.
the lack of care and awareness around mental
Yeah.
health?
And so maybe, it might even be helpful just to take a step back and name what we're talking about. When we're talking about Black mental health, we're not talking about a totally unique, different experience. Black folks, if we want to say that in the whole African diaspora, just in America, either way, they are still equally human. There's some universal human experiences that go on around the nervous system and the mind and the body and the brain, all these type of things. So absolutely, to your first question, this is not unique to the Black community. When we're talking about Black mental health, what we're talking about is that universal human experience with an overlay of these unique cultural experiences. Going about your regular day, every day, with a certain identity that's going to mean certain things for you that it might not mean for other people, or it might mean that those things are exacerbated or highlighted in a different way. They show up differently. So if that doesn't make sense to you because it's something racial, I think you can take it out of that and have a very different experience when you're talking about mental health and motherhood or parenthood, right? Children and mental health versus older adults. There are different ways in which identity impacts how we show up and what it means to have a healthy self and then also struggle
On the other end.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think are some of the primary barriers today in preventing access to quality care? And again, we'll start kind of broad and then lean in specifically to members of the African American community.
So one of the barriers that I think is just huge is the availability and access and affordability. I'm part of the profession. Okay. So I'm not trying to front or nothing like that, but I'm telling you, therapy is expensive. Okay. So if you don't have a good EAP or employee assistance program through your job, or you don't have access to something like Lyra that gives you care for your spouses and your dependents, when you're talking about ongoing care weekly, that's a lot of money to have to spend on a weekly basis. And then you add some of those hidden costs, right? Of maybe if it's in-person therapy, of transporting yourself to and fro. That's a level of expense that you're incurring as well. If you need to take sick leave to be able to take that hour off, right? Which may end up an hour and a half when you add the transportation piece to it. That's a
an
level of it,
expense.
right? It starts to add up. So I think that affordability piece is something that is a barrier, because you also see in some research where you see the most of the people that are going and getting benefits like that, like mental health benefits, they have a little more money. They have insurance, they have a level of education. So one thing that hurts my heart is the disparity that can happen there. Socioeconomically, it's kind of this have and the have-nots when it comes to mental health care, which is why I appreciate working at a place like Lyra, because it can offer that to all the peoples, so I think that affordability, the transportation is a big deal. We already named it, but the mental health stigma is also a big deal. So to actually go to the place and do the thing might make people nervous and uncomfortable.
Do you think, and this is kind of alluding to one of your earlier points, but the role that sectors like entertainment play in either creating barriers or helping to create access, but how mental health is portrayed in movies and in books and in all these different multimedia platforms that we have around us? Like, do you see that as a barrier? Do you see that changing? Or do we have a lot of work, left to
But,
do?
I will say, I think things have gotten a lot better over the last decade or so, at least 5 to 7 years. I've seen more accurate portrayals of either counseling, of therapy, of therapists on television, which is
Mhm.
really encouraging to me. But I think there was a long stretch there where people didn't trust it, and they said, I don't know, I'm not doing something like that. And I will say, listen, no judgment from me. Okay. I am a psychologist. And my first time going to therapy, I found myself realizing how much stigma I had for my own
Mhm.
profession. And
Mhm.
so I'm sitting here like, I don't really want this person to think I'm crazy or like weak. I need to present my best self, like look like I have myself together for this person. I didn't really want to go once I made the first appointment, so all this stuff is coming out of me and I work in this stuff all day. So it's very easy and understandable to
Mm.
have that sort of reaction and hesitancy. So it's a level of vulnerability that you do have
Mhm.
to do. And so I think that in itself, the fears of vulnerability, the fears of exposing, talking to strangers, not wanting folks to know your personal business, stuff like that, definitely can be a barrier for people getting the care they need.
And is that or what strategies would you suggest for overcoming these barriers? And this could be personal strategies
Mhm.
or people that may be gatekeepers at
Yeah.
companies or gatekeepers that are developing and designing programs. What strategies should we be thinking about to remove these barriers and to get to a place where mental health can become
Mhm.
a part of our day-to-day lives and how we operate? It's conversations that we're bringing to the table as whole, well-rounded human beings.
Sure. I think that's a great question. So some of these things we talked about, affordability, access to care, those type of things, those are difficult to control on an individual level. So I'll name that, those type of things when somebody wants care, but they can't get it, that's the hard part, and so that's where I would call on leaders to make sure that the care that you're offering is not only easily accessible, and that there's diversity in it. So what I mean by
Mhm.
diversity is there's multiple options,
Right.
where maybe you have virtual, in person, there's different places you can see different types of folks. I would also say that care should be culturally responsive. So we talk about that a
Yeah.
lot at Lyra because representation in the counseling room, particularly racially, particularly for Black Americans, is wildly important because it lowers something we call cultural mistrust.
Mhm.
When you come into that room and you see somebody that doesn't look like you, matter of fact, they actually look like people that harm you. Okay,
Mhm.
when I told you that vulnerability piece is much less likely to happen because you say you're not going to get me. You don't understand. You've created a whole narrative around why this won't work. So having care, with representative folks is a first thing, but also with folks that can talk about and know about what's happening culturally and how that impacts how you show up mentally, emotionally, vocationally. That's huge. That's
That
huge.
is
So getting that type of care,
huge.
quality care is a big deal.
Huge, and I think I think we're starting to see more of that, but there's still so much more work that needs to be done in just getting the right representation in
Mhm,
doctors' offices or, like, for example, with me, like, I've had such a hard time finding a therapist that
mhm.
sits at all the different
Yeah.
dimensions of humanness that I
Yes,
sit
yes,
at, and getting to connect with someone that just gets it, that's like,
yes.
"Yep, I understand your experience, I understand where you are," and then helping you navigate that in a clear, cohesive, concise way to get you to where you need to be. Like, there's still so much work left for us to do to get to that point, and I do
Yes,
hope in the years to come, that's exactly where we will be, and you'll start seeing more people just showing up in more authentic and rich ways,
100%,
contributing to
100%.
society.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that too, because I think that's another thing I think maybe I don't know if I call it a barrier, but I think it's a hindrance to the endurance and kind of journey of mental health and getting care because it takes a minute to figure out who's going to be the person that, like you said, gets you,
Mhm.
and so it might take a couple of tries, And
Months.
you're right, a couple of folks. And now, but it's so important because the research that I did for my dissertation talks about mistrust in the therapy room. And what time and time again, what you see in that research is the relationship that someone has with their therapist, it's called therapeutic relationship, is the biggest predictor of outcome of care. So it's not as important as how they approach the care or what they say or do, as long as they don't hurt you, but if they are doing a good enough job, but there's something there where you say, I trust you, I can do this with you, I'm bought in, money. Okay, that's what you need. So you need to make sure, give yourself patience and a level of empowerment, I would say, to ask the questions you need to ask, figure out, give it some sessions. Okay, if it's been 7 minutes into the first time, then chill out, like give it a minute. But let yourself see, can this person help me with my stuff? They may not be your best friend ever. They may not be somebody you'd go and get ice cream with, but can they help you? Can they get you and understand you? That's the question.
And what are the next steps, do you think, to getting more people that look like us, Black and brown Americans, or just Black and brown people across the diaspora, getting them into therapy rooms, getting them to show up for their doctor's appointments and not neglecting signs that their bodies are sending to them? And I think about my family first and foremost, they come to mind, but talking about therapy, like growing up, it was like, nope, that's not for us. That's what crazy people do. Or even now it's like, I don't need a therapist. Like, I'm just going to go through this by myself. And just recognizing some of the things that they've been through collectively, that we've been through together. It's like, how can you not want to just even articulate that to someone else, and seeing that as a part of your healing process and healing journey? What is the next step to initiating that process, or just getting people to say, you know what, I don't need to do this alone or by myself, and there is support, there is somebody that can help me like totally clean my life up and pushing me in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a great question, Antonio. We can talk about that. Oh no, this is part 3. To even dive into that, it's a big important question. When I give talks, a lot of times when I'm talking about race-based stress, race-related stress or Black mental health, and I'm talking about caring for yourself, the first thing that I say is you cannot care for that which you don't know about. You cannot care for something you're not aware of. So the first step you have to have is you have to consciously and intentionally label what's going on with you. And you have to know when that's not right. And then you can care for yourself. So the reason I bring that up is because I see a lot of people, just in general, but particularly in the Black community, particularly Black women, okay? What will happen is they are strong, okay? They are doing the things. They are living their lives. So when they're thinking about, somebody brings up something like therapy or counseling or something like that,
it's like, I don't have time.
I don't have time, but also I'm fine. Like I'm doing what I need to do. Well, wait, how are you doing though? And here's what happens. A lot of people say, I don't really even know, right? They haven't slowed down enough. Like you said, I don't have time. They haven't slowed down enough to really check in, but they also don't know what indicators, what are the red flags, the check engine lights, if you will, that's going on with their body and their mind to say something's not right. Yes, you can get out of bed. Yes, you can go to work. You can do all the things and charm everybody. Okay. But what are your red flags? What's going on? Do you lose your appetite? You got a headache? Okay.
Back pain, neck pain.
Is it somatic? There's research to show a lot of women of color, a lot of Black women will have physical pain before they'll really take time, to really be aware of some kind of emotional distress. And so that may be confusing, or off-putting to think, oh, I don't need a therapist. I just need to stop eating as much sugar, or something like that. That may not be.
My family's like, it's just gas. And I'm like,
yeah, that's all it is. That's all it is. Your sleep disrupted. What's going on? Do you need a couple of glasses of wine to go to sleep at night? You know what I'm saying? Like, ask yourself these questions. What's going on with you? You constantly twitching your leg. What's happening with you? Those could be symptoms of anxiety or depression. Do you feel like there's a person inside of you that just wants to scream all day, but you've got a smile on your face. That stuff matters. So really being able to label, how are you actually doing? Without the platitudes, without I'm good, I'm fine, I'm blessed and highly favored, with all of that. Real. How are you doing? You know? And then how do you know when you need to care for yourself, and what are the caring behaviors you specifically need to be able to soothe, you know? So if you're in distress, to be able to soothe and regulate your nervous system, or to even move from survival to thriving. Some people have been through so much, they don't even, that concept
doesn't register.
Yeah, it doesn't even register for them, because they've just been trying to make it through. And I know since 2020, it's a whole lot of us out there.
Yeah.
In and out of the Black community, just trying to survive. Okay. So I get it. Life has been lifing. You understand, you know?
That's something I'm definitely realizing and seeing. It's like people waking up to the reality that we're not returning to what life was pre-pandemic. And so we're starting to see people face like harsh realities of what present day is, and struggling to navigate that. It's like we collectively, I don't think, pause to say, hey, we went through some shit. How's everyone doing? It was kind of like, we went through this, great. You went to work from home, like deal with it solo, come back, and like, let's just keep moving. But how do you individually pause and, to your point, ask like, am I okay? What is going on internally? Am I okay? And how do I move forward? What support do I need to do that?
And look, here's the thing. The pandemic affected everybody, you know, and it's a whole lot of other stuff that went on in the last 4 years that was not related to the pandemic too. So, but if we just take that one example, I think it's a really good metaphor for what it means to have compassion for yourself and honor yourself as a human, because the pandemic in itself implies a global reach, right? And it affected each person individually. It doesn't mean you didn't get affected. It doesn't mean you don't, you sit here and say, well, everybody experienced it, so mine doesn't matter. The reason that it matters to me, the reason I think it matters most, is because that chronic stress, the way that impacts your body and your health, that's why it matters. Okay. Because if you cannot, that's not sustainable that way. It'll show up some kind of way. Whether you keep getting sick, whether your cholesterol, your blood pressure is high, you got heart disease, intense depression, chronic anxiety, there's a way that it'll show back up. So that's why I feel like it matters, not because everybody loves feelings and talking about all of that. I get it, right? I get it. Okay. It matters because your body matters.
Exactly. So there you go, folks. Pause, take a minute, a hot 5, a hot 10 in the next day or so, and ask yourself, how am I feeling? And what support do you need? Support is 100% and absolutely there. There are countless platforms, digital platforms now out there that are catering to mental health and well-being. So the support is there if you need it. Dr. Holman, what insights or practices can individuals, regardless of their identity and backgrounds, adopt to promote mental wellness and resilience within their communities, and specifically, again, within our community, the Black community?
Yeah, I think that language is powerful and shifts culture. And so you and I will talk about this later, right, at a conference later this month, but storytelling.
Huge.
You, as a person who have gone on this journey of understanding what you need and caring for yourself in light of that, and moving along those lines, being able to embrace the struggle and the strength and all those things, and then you share that with somebody else, incredibly powerful. You are going to give that person evidence that, hey, it's okay to share struggle. I don't have to suppress this. I don't have to live in shame about what I'm struggling with. And look, it looks like it could end up okay, maybe, right? Based on what they're saying, it may not be death and destruction. Okay, when I leave that place, it could actually be all right. The more we storytell, the more we normalize. Hey, oh, did the video go away?
Yeah. Oh, we're back.
Okay. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the more we can normalize utilizing care and saying things like, well, I had a counselor that said this thing, or
Mhm.
when I was in therapy, I said this. It's okay. When you go for the first time, this is what'll happen. The more we demystify and empower folks and normalize that, oh man, that can really shift. Because
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen people start care because they're like, okay, my brother could do it.
Yeah.
Try, or my coworker said it. It sounded okay, so let me go ahead and try. You're promoting bravery and courage, and I think that's really
Shifting
what.
perceptions around the entire practice.
Yes.
And I think it's storytelling through the process, but then afterwards as well. So how do you show case growth without waving a flag like, hey, I'm in the green,
Uh-huh.
and being your authentic self,
Sure.
or getting closer to self
Mhm.
through quality care and healing?
Right, right. I love the way you said that around getting closer to, because I think when you're talking about, kind of barriers or hindrances to care, I think we as an American society have really gone into and lean into this idea that it's okay to not be okay, right?
Mm,
And I think that's very true. I think that's accurate. It is okay to not do that. But I think some parts of our society are ready for that next question in truth,
mm,
because not only is it not okay or okay to not be okay, but it's also something where we want to normalize that it is a journey, that it won't be a thing where it's like, okay, I'm not okay here. I went and got care and then I never struggled again.
yeah.
And I was great, right? That's not realistic. It's a non-linear, complicated path. What happened to you 10 years ago or 10 years from now may be totally different. You may have seasons where you need different levels of support, and that's fine. So I think that's something too I want to get people normalizing and validating, that you can need care for here, this period, then you can leave, you can come back, you can
Mhm.
figure out what you need. But getting acquainted and embracing whatever you may have that's hard for you in terms of mental health and wellness is totally fine.
And I think too, on that, every time you get care or seek care, it's building your toolbox and capabilities to navigate the mind in a compassionate and
Mhm.
seamless way that it may not be easy, but the next time you come up against that struggle or something similar to that, you're like, okay, is this something I can solve on my own? And typically, what you'll find is, yes, you have the tools to now navigate and manage that. And it
Mhm.
might just be a lighter check in with, a thought partner to help
Right.
you reassess the feelings or structure the feelings in a way that makes sense to you that you can then synthesize and move through versus like, oh,
Yes, yes, I think that's true. And similar, like we said last week with the privilege, where it's like considering that your narrative, your internal narrative or perception may not be the accurate one. I think
mhm,
that applies here too. When you're talking about stigma and mental health care, what comes up for you when you start struggling, when you start having a hard time? What are you telling yourself about yourself? What are you
mhm,
telling yourself about other folks? That they're weak, they just need to get it together.
mhm,
Can't believe I'm doing this. Not everybody else knows what they're doing. I'm still the one struggling. That may
mhm,
not be true,
mhm,
and so what somebody can do for you, a mental health professional, is speak into that,
mhm.
and get you to start being aware and observe
Okay.
your own thoughts and feelings and behaviors to say, wait, if somebody else talked to me like I'm talking to me right now, how would that land? And really
Mhm.
breaking that up so that you can treat yourself with more compassion and grace.
How do you think this shows up in the workplace, or what is the evolution of this conversation in the workplace? So moving beyond, we have benefits,
Hmm.
we have great benefits to this space of like intervention. So
Hmm.
it's embedded in how we behave, it's embedded in the expectations, it's embedded in narratives that we're driving on what
Hmm.
it means to be a well and whole employee, but also human outside of that.
I think that's a wonderful thing to reflect on for sure. Part of it I think starts with understanding how the workplace itself can impact mental health, and how what we bring into work, the identities we hold, and all of that impacts mental health as well. because I think sometimes what can happen is we can traditionally think of the workplace like, okay, you at work,
Mm-hmm.
do what you need to do, go on your assembly line, do your stuff, type on your computer, check out, go home. Boom. But we're not thinking about things like burnout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like lack of safety, like harm in the work, psychological harm, microaggressions, racism at work, unfair treatment, micromanagement, a bad manager. All of that stuff can
Is
really
real.
impact. Yeah, that is it not
It's
real?
real.
Okay, yes, yes. That is real talk. That stuff can cause distress, right? And anxiety. Look, people being laid off around you. All of this type of stuff. What is going on? What's the future? Another restructuring. What's happening? All of that type of stuff. Really acknowledging from leadership, these things can affect you,
Mm-hmm.
and so really naming that and then offering some proactive behaviors to try to limit that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
key, because I think sometimes people do that first part where they're like, yeah, mental health is real, take care of yourself. Burnout is a real thing.
And then they keep
Try not to let
moving.
that happen. Godspeed. I'm gonna tell you if it does, right? That's really the vibe, as opposed to, hey, what systems are in place that are
Yeah.
reinforcing that people should work themselves to the point of burnout, right?
Systems, and I think also to measures around accountability. How do
Yep.
you hold people that are in charge of leading and
Mhm.
guiding other people in the
You.
workforce, holding them accountable to, I'm going to do what I can do to help make
Mhm.
sure that you're showing up as your best, and also recognizing that in everybody doing that, the organization gets the best out of everybody that are playing key roles to drive
No,
business
100%,
success.
100%. I think that's really very vital to think about things like that too. Thinking about reinforcement. I'm big on reinforcement. What behaviors are you reinforcing that are actually unhealthy and contributing to distress? Uh,
Hmm.
are you praising people for overwork? Are those the people that get rewarded and promoted and whatnot? People that take care of their mental health? Are they seen in certain ways? So really looking at that culture that you've
Hmm.
got around mental health and wellness. I think a lot of things I've seen from companies that are doing this well, they have proactive pieces around mental health. So they'll have workshops, webinars, they'll even have mindfulness moments. So they'll have little
Hmm.
guided meditation pieces in the workday, those type of things, making sure people are aware of what types of benefits they have, having people,
Hmm.
for example, from Lyra, come and talk about those things. Uh, that's great to continue the conversation and keep it going. I
Hmm.
don't think it's true or realistic that everybody needs care all of the time. I don't think that's necessarily the case. What I see as an ideal experience is that people are aware of themselves and what they need and will seek out helpful care if and when they need it.
They need it. Yeah.
That's what we want.
Awesome. And are there, community resources or support networks that you would suggest, recommend that individuals, organizations can turn to for assistance or guidance in navigating mental health challenges?
Oh, big question, Antonio. This is a broad one. You know what I will say? I will go all the way back to we talking about these conscious labeling and caring behaviors. Start there. Start with labeling yourself. Get
Awesome.
you a feelings wheel off the internet.
Mm.
If you have one of those, start there with really understanding how you are doing. And then I think from there, you can maybe get the resources that you need. We have some free resources on our blog, Lyra Health blog. So I've written things around what to expect in therapy for the first time. Real common question, so people feel like they know what's going to happen before they get in there, so they don't get nervous or as nervous, I'll say. But I think looking up your employee assistance program. So even if you have the issues we talked about around affordability and accessibility, if you are employed, seeing what that gets you.
Hmm.
So looking up your EAP, a lot more people have Lyra Health than they realize. So looking that up, seeing what you can get for what you have, you know, seeing what your insurance will get you, shopping around for the
Hmm.
therapist, like we said. So putting some work into it, the same way you would if you're a parent with a new child and you're looking for a pediatrician. And you
Hmm.
say, okay, I don't really like that one. That one is too far. This one only does, right? Narrowing it down to seeing what are your priorities and how you could get through that. I think it's great. I think you can use your insurance as a starting place. If you don't have to stay there, but it's an option for you to use. Word of mouth. A lot of folks will recommend certain therapists to their friends, or you've got friends that are therapists. Okay,
Mhm.
recommend, see what they have, tap their strengths and knowledge base as well. It could be a great place to start.
I think for me, or one of the things or a few things that I would add to that, just kind of thinking about people that may not even be at that place or point
Mhm.
yet, like journaling, or
Yeah,
even just the power of having a conversation with a trusted friend to
yeah,
just say, this is what I'm going through. Like, there's something therapeutic about not feeling like you're sitting with your issue or stuff alone.
yeah,
And then even being able to lean into things like spirituality or religion
yes,
as a mechanism to take the weight off, like give it to
yes,
source, give it to God.
yes,
And can
yes.
you keep moving forward or leveraging that as a tool for resilience?
100%. That's definitely what I would say. I think that's the talking to someone else. Here's what I would encourage folks that were listening: just move the needle just slightly. Okay. If you killing the game out here, if you are just out here just weekly therapy doing all the things, you keep doing what you're doing. Okay. But on the off chance that maybe you need to move, maybe it is time for you to go ahead and do the thing afraid.
Mhm.
Make a call and do the thing, and that's great. You can do that.
Big
If
step.
you're at the point where this paralyzes me, the idea of actually reaching out, it's fine. Start where I said, look up the feelings wheel. No one's going to know. It's just your own internet search. Okay. So you can just look at it, see how you're feeling. Think about where you hold stress in your body. What happens to you? How do you know when you're really struggling? Is it something like we mentioned where sleep is disturbed, or you're lost your appetite, or you have a higher appetite? It could be a lot of different things. Maybe for me, for example, my shoulders are up to my ears. A lot of tension.
Mhm.
So if you're not someone with lots of crying spells and can't stop, it doesn't mean you're not in distress. It
Mhm.
just means you shows up differently. So start there. Just start there, and then move. Challenge yourself to keep growing and moving wherever you are at, just so that you can get what you need. Because there are dire consequences when you don't do that. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I have one more closing question for you before we get to rapid fire.
Okay.
Do you have any insights you'd share or things you'd want folks to know as it relates to inclusive language when we're talking about mental health, and recognizing that our words are powerful, they have meaning, and we may say stuff and we're saying stuff all day that
Mhm.
means nothing to us, but the receiver on the other end, that could have a lasting impact in just how they move forward and what that means to them as they're
Mhm.
trying to figure out the experience that they're maybe going through.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, I love this topic, and I think language is so powerful. I think that I'm gonna say two things. I think the first thing is using language on purpose. So I think part of what we do to destigmatize and normalize mental health care is saying words like that, like counseling and therapy.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times what we'll do is talk kind of around it,
Yeah.
or we'll say, maybe you need to go see somebody. They were struggling. They had some stuff going on, right? Just say
Mhm.
what was happening.
Mhm.
They had a traumatic event. There was some real, dysfunction happening. So they went to see a therapist. That's fine. You can name them, because it's fine to do that, right? So you don't have to talk around it. I think that helps with destigmatization in itself. Then when you're talking about mental health conditions or situations, being very careful to humanize that experience,
Mhm.
and not making someone's distress or mental health condition a single story.
Issue.
Um, Words like crazy,
Mhm.
using words in places that they don't belong. Like, oh, I was so depressed because I missed The Voice last night. You were not depressed. You were disappointed.
Mhm.
I'm so OCD because I really don't like to scratch out things on my paper. You are not OCD. Okay, you just
Mhm.
like to be paper. So you not using those real haphazardly, and just kind of using them intentionally, so that somebody is struggling with
Mhm.
that they don't. Another one, saying you're going to kill yourself, or that you just want to
Mhm.
die, those type of things, because I don't know, Chick-fil-A was closed, those type of things. People are joking, they don't mean harm. a lot of times. But rates of suicidality and depression are so high and so unspoken
Huge.
and so stigmatized, right? That you don't know what you're reinforcing to certain people, even people closest to you, you think you might know. Okay. And so that's the type of thing. Use your words carefully, use them intentionally. Avoid making it seem like these people are defective or broken in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
And thank you to you all that took the time to tune in. Dr. Holman, before we go, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
All right. These were hard last time.
What does success mean to you?
Oh, I don't know. Let me see. Just any kind of success.
Personal success, collective success. What does that mean to you?
Oh. Generally, I was thinking about something the other day. I was thinking, I would like to leave this world better than when I found it. I'd like to move the needle on some of the things, knowing that the work I do didn't start in my lifetime and will end in my lifetime, but I'd like to move some sort of needle there. For me, success when it comes to mental health and talking about it, success looks like, I don't know. It used to look like working at HBCU, having young Black and brown faces look at me and say, I'm going to do this too. I want to help other people in this way. Now it looks like people saying, okay, maybe I do need care after all. Maybe I'll go ahead and go. The way you just explained that, I think I'm going to go ahead and do something,
Go do that.
That's my why for working, is getting people to do that.
Beautiful. And your greatest life lesson is?
Oh my gosh. I think something I relearned more than I'd like to, I'll admit that, is that we hold joy and tragedy,
At the same
beauty
time.
and sorrow always at the same time. Always at the same time. Life is incredibly complex that way.
Mm-hmm. And to be authentically me means?
Oh man. That I can enter into certain spaces, um, aware of the risk of vulnerability, but willing to take it,
Mm,
that it's worth
I
it.
love that.
Mhm.
And one thing you would have changed or done differently on your way to leadership?
Mm. I would give myself a little more room to, I would critique myself less. I would give
Mm,
myself more space to learn and grow, and not be in such a rush to look like all the things were together, but at least just slow down, be intentional, enjoy the journey on the way, and not kind of overly critique myself for ways that I just was learning, along the journey.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Holman. Where can people find you if they would like to connect, learn more about you, your work, learn more about how they can go about finding care or taking that first step into just taking complete control
Mhm.
of their mental health?
Sure. Work-wise, you can find me on LinkedIn, but also at Lyra Health on the workforce transformation team. So if you are somebody who has that, I'm available, answer questions, get you connected, talk to you or your people, about whatever's going on. I'm on the internet a little bit. I'll be on Instagram as Dr. Holman with an A, and so I'll be out there too. But other than that, my introversion won't let me do much more than that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Holman. Thank you again so much to everyone that took the time to tune in. Again, we launched a new podcast website, livechatswithfriends.com. Go check it out. Sign up for our weekly newsletter for inspiration on your journey to becoming your best self. Have a very happy and safe Mental Health Awareness Month. Talk to folks, check in with yourself, do all the things that we mentioned here today. And I promise you will be a step closer to getting closer to yourself and checking in with yourself and being a better human being in the world today. Stay true to yourselves. Much love. And we will talk to you in June next month. See y'all soon.